So good evening dear students, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu news analysis. Today is 10th January 2025 and today we have some important articles for the discussion, and one by one we'll try to discuss all these important articles in a very detailed manner. And along with all these articles we also have one mains practice question, and this practice question is very important because this practice question deals with India's relations with Afghanistan, particularly the Taliban regime, which is now largely controlling the Afghanistan. However, Afghanistan strategically a very important for India in its foreign policy. So therefore it is if India wanted to have a larger access to the Central Asian region beyond Afghanistan, so Afghanistan is very important, and because of that reason India is already planning to reach Afghanistan through this Chabahar port, because anyway Pakistan has denied India access to the Afghanistan, and because of that reason India has been exploring the alternatives to have access to Afghanistan. And apart from that, when there was a democratically elected government was there in Afghanistan, so India invested a lot in Afghanistan, right? So India also enjoys a tremendous amount of goodwill in Afghanistan, right? So for India, protecting its interests also a very important aspect, a very important dimension of its overall policy with Afghanistan, particularly with Taliban. Now in this context, recently what happened was, high level meet speculations came to light because between India and Taliban. So because of that reason there are some speculations that India may have the diplomatic relations with the Taliban regime also. Now in this backdrop, so we'll try to discuss one question on this. The question is, analyze the impact of Taliban's return to power on India's foreign policy towards Afghanistan, and what challenges and opportunities does it present. So this is the question. This is much older question, but we'll try to discuss it with respect to the present Taliban government and how India could actually proceed forward. Because with respect to Taliban or with respect to Afghanistan, I would say, so India follows a particular policy that is Afghan led, Afghan controlled and Afghan owned process. That is what India has been very often demanding for, right? So whatever policy that India follows with respect to Afghanistan in general and Taliban in particular, so that particular policy should be aligned with this principle of India, that is in Afghanistan owned, Afghanistan controlled and Afghanistan led process. So that is what India has been demanding for. So with respect to this particular question, you could write a brief introduction about Taliban's return into Afghanistan and how Taliban has been trying to control the entire Afghanistan, and Indian foreign policy makers have also identified that Taliban will be the future of Afghanistan, right? So if India wanted to engage with Afghanistan, or if India wanted to have a greater control to Central Asian region, or to that matter larger Eurasia, so it is very important that India needs to strengthen its relations with whatever regime which is in place in Afghanistan, because on the other hand countries like Russia, China, so key players in the region, so they already started engaging with the Taliban. So I would say that their engagement with Taliban is a proactive engagement. So therefore India should not left behind in this particular aspect. So India should also actively engage with all relevant and necessary stakeholders, and India should have a strong presence in Afghanistan. That is very important for India to protect its interests, particularly its investments, because as I have already told you that India has invested a lot of money in Afghanistan, so when there was a democratically elected government. And apart from that, Central Asian region, it is very important for India's mineral security, India's energy security and its larger connectivity to the Eurasian region. So because of all these reasons, so Afghanistan is very important for us, and we all knew that Taliban returned to power in Afghanistan to 2021 August. So however, the present Taliban is known as Taliban 2.0, because in 1990s there was also already a brutal Taliban regime that was existing in Afghanistan, but this current Taliban is known as Taliban 2.0. right? So it has created a significant shift in India's foreign policy, because as I have already mentioned that India believes in a particular policy with respect to Afghanistan, that is Afghan owned, Afghan controlled and Afghan led process, whatever it may be, but India believes in this particular policy. So after Taliban came to power, there is a significant shift in India's foreign policy, particularly the way how India and Indian policy makers, foreign policy makers, have been started looking at Afghanistan, right? So because we have a lot of strategic security and economic interests, not just in Afghanistan but beyond Afghanistan, particularly in Central Asia. So it is very important for India to secure those interests. So because of that reason, it is important that India should engage with the Taliban as well, right? So when we started engaging with the Taliban, so we could protect our interests and we could also better our existing prospects in Afghanistan, and that is the policy which is largely guiding. And the other thing that we need to understand is that in Afghanistan we have been enjoying a lot of goodwill. We have been enjoying a lot of goodwill in Afghanistan, and therefore it is very important for India to protect that goodwill, right? So it is to some extent we could say that the soft power that we have been enjoying in Afghanistan, and we should protect this soft power dimension, this goodwill in Afghanistan. And to some extent India's presence in Afghanistan check the China and Pakistan rivalry as well. So China-Pakistan rivalry is also a cause of concern for us. And if India wanted to make sure that this radicalization, Islamic fundamentalism, cross-border terrorism are under control, so again India should maintain a very close relations with Taliban. So all these prospects have been, or all these compulsions have been making India looking for the ways to engage with the Taliban, right? So we'll understand what was the impact of Taliban's return to Afghanistan on India's foreign policy and how it will impact India's foreign policy in future. So that dimension we'll try to understand here. Now, we all knew that when Taliban came to power, right? So Taliban is a military, it's not a legitimized military. Taliban is not a legitimized military. So Taliban is a militant group, right? It is an Islamic militant group. Now when Taliban returned to Afghanistan, in fact the threats of terror organizations or terror networks such as Jaish-e-Mohammed or Lashkar-e-Toiba, so their presence or their threats much more amplified, because these are also Islamic terrorist organizations. So it is generally believed that Taliban has been hosting, or Taliban has been providing safe shelter or safe havens to these terrorist organizations such as Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Toiba, right? So in fact these terrorist organizations which have been historically targeted India when it comes to attacking India through large scale terror attacks or large scale violence, so they may leverage Taliban support against India, right? So they may plan a large scale terrorist attacks against India by leveraging the presence of Taliban in Afghanistan, especially in Kashmir region, right? So apart from that, India already invested around $3 billion in Afghanistan of various we could say that Jaranj Dilaram highway that India has built. India has also built Salma Dam in Afghanistan, and India has also built a parliament building, and apart from that India has also built hospitals, schools, and number of other investment and infrastructure projects. So therefore so far it is believed that India has invested more than $3 billion in Afghanistan, right? So these investments have been facing uncertainty because we built these infrastructure projects when there was a democratically elected government. Before Taliban, we had a very strong and friendly relations with the earlier existing regime, democratic regime, and India also maintained a sustainable presence in Afghanistan, and that's where India has invested around 3 billion in Afghanistan, right? So after Taliban came to power, so those investments are they have been facing a huge uncertainty, because earlier it was believed that Taliban would align with Pakistan and Taliban would act against the interests of India as well, right? So as I've already told you, when we talk about the examples, India built this Jaranj Delaram highway and Salma Dam. So they are now in a fragile state. And apart from that, Pakistan and China are also gaining a huge influence in Afghanistan. Now, a permanent and strong presence of both Pakistan and China in Afghanistan is not good for India in the long term. But now what has been happening? So India lags behind, and both China and Pakistan have been substantially increasing their presence in Afghanistan, directly or indirectly. So therefore this could be a threat, right? So over Afghanistan, India faces challenges in maintaining its diplomatic foothold, and India was excluded from many key negotiations, such as the Trico Plus. So there are several negotiations which were already happened. The objective of those negotiations is to make sure that peace is brought back to Afghanistan, stability is brought back to Afghanistan. Now the re-emerging of Taliban 2.0 in Afghanistan would not result in security threats for the countries in the region, whether it is China or Central Asia, or for that matter Russia. So that is the objective of organizing this Triocop Plus. But even such negotiations also, so India was not considered part of it, right? So because of all these reasons, these are being considered as threats. And apart from that, the humanitarian engagement dilemma that India has been facing. Now humanitarian engagement dilemma in the sense that now on the one side, India is not ready to recognize Taliban. So because Taliban is a militant group, and Taliban historically houses the terrorist organizations as well. However, India follows the policy of zero tolerance towards terrorism. So this is our policy. We follow the policy of zero tolerance towards terrorism. Therefore, it is against our principles to directly engage with the Taliban, right? So while maintaining non-recognition of Taliban, this is the stance that we have been following. However, India continues to send this humanitarian aid to Afghanistan to send the humanitarian, so to address the humanitarian crisis. Now in fact, Afghanistan has been facing a humanitarian crisis in the sense that they lack food, and they also lack medicine, and so they lack proper facilities, all these things that they have been suffering with. So therefore, in order to address this particular problem, address this humanitarian crisis, India continues to send humanitarian aid, so thereby positioning itself as a responsible regional player, right? Because before India committed for the development of Afghanistan, and that's why India has invested billions of dollars in Afghanistan. So India also maintaining a tremendous goodwill in Afghanistan. So our priority is to maintain that goodwill, right? So because this goodwill will give us long-term results. So that's where India has been planning to continue this humanitarian aid, but not recognizing the Taliban regime, and this is what we call as a humanitarian engagement dilemma that we have been facing. So when we talk about an example of this, so India already sent around 50,000 metric tons of wheat to Afghanistan already. However, there are certain challenges that India would likely to face with respect to Taliban. So we need to understand what are the challenges that we have been facing with respect to Taliban, right? So when we talk about those challenges, as we already knew that Taliban is not a democratically elected government. Therefore, it is not enjoying the necessary level of credibility and legitimacy in the eyes of the people of Afghanistan and also the international community. Remember that this is a military group. So therefore, since this is a military group, it has also been supporting other terrorist organizations. So we have just discussed Lashkar-e-Toiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed. So all these are terrorist organizations, and most of the these terrorist organizations are also anti-India terror groups, and because of that particular reason, so Taliban's return could further would further strengthen these terrorist organizations and terror groups, right? So in fact, Kashmir, a very sensitive and volatile region for us, and in fact India has been facing a lot of internal security threat in the Kashmir region because of the cross-border terrorism that has been emanating from Pakistan into Kashmir, and it is also believed that Taliban regime would also help for fueling this cross-border terrorism and also the radicalization and fundamentalism of people in Kashmir, right? So after Taliban came to power in Afghanistan, we could see a number of cross-border terrorist incidents have happened. Terror attacks continues to happen. So therefore this is the major concern that India would likely face. And apart from that, Chabahar port, so Chabahar port is also a strategic project, and Chabahar port is located in Iran, and in fact this Chabahar port is developed by India to make sure that we have an alternative route to access Afghanistan, right? So we have an alternative route to access Afghanistan through Chabahar port, because anyway Pakistan denies India's access to Afghanistan, right? So therefore this is an alternative route to access Afghanistan, right? So now it has been facing uncertainty as Afghanistan is under the Taliban regime, right? So earlier when there was a democratically elected government in Afghanistan, so at that point of time India tried to explore such an alternative routes to access Afghanistan, but after Taliban came to power, we could say that so this is also under question, and this is also facing a kind of an uncertainty. And in recent times also our relations with Iran is also not that good, and because of that particular reason also this Chabahar port has been facing some challenges, and there has been rising Iran, China and Pakistan axis as well, right? So Iran, China, Pakistan axis as well, so this is also a cause of concern for India. And apart from that, India so far not formally or directly recognized or diplomatically recognized Taliban's regime's legitimacy in Afghanistan, and that make India isolate itself diplomatically or Taliban diplomatically. But regional powers like Iran, Russia, China, they have started engaging with the Taliban, so they are more proactive than India, because India follows the policy of zero tolerance towards terrorism, and that makes India less reluctant or more reluctant to engage with the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. But on the other hand, other major powers, Russia, Iran, China, so they have started engaging with Afghanistan in a more proactive basis. And apart from that, India's stance on human rights violations in Afghanistan is also another major reason which decides India's policy of either recognition of Taliban regime or engagement with the Taliban regime, because we continuously read that human rights of women, minorities and religious rights and freedom of expression is being openly violated by the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. So we are ourselves committed for the protection of human rights. So therefore because Taliban regime has been not paying any attention to the protection of these rights, which are very important. So this is also one challenge that India has been facing when it comes to determining the extent of engagement with the Taliban, to what extent that we should engage, whether we should have a full diplomatic engagement with Taliban or we have to partially recognize Taliban. So these are all the problems that India has been facing. But however, it is not free from the opportunities. The Taliban regime would also provide us, India, with a lot of opportunities, so those opportunities will understand. So now before the civilian government, particularly the democratically elected government, was in Afghanistan, so at that point of time, so there was a kind of a civil war used to take place in Afghanistan, and at that point of time also there was instability, there was violence between the Taliban regime and different terror elements, terror organizations which are present in Afghanistan, and American troops were also stationed in Afghanistan. And apart from that, so the civilian government was also existing. So to some extent we could say that there was some kind of instability and violence that was existing, but it is expected that the Taliban regime would bring in much anticipated stability in Afghanistan and beyond the region, right? So by continues to provide humanitarian aid to Afghanistan, right? So as I have already told you that India has sent around 50,000 tons of metric tons of wheat, because Afghanistan has been facing food crisis, right? It has been facing food crisis, it has been facing humanitarian crisis. So in order to assist Afghanistan in this situation, India already supplied 50,000 tons of wheat to Afghanistan, and apart from that, India already provided a lot of vaccine, a lot of medicines to Afghanistan. So therefore, all these things would further strengthen soft power, would help India maintain soft power and ensuring goodwill among Afghan people even without the formal recognition of the Taliban. And apart from that, there are some regional organizations such as Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So through these regional organizations also, India can engage with Taliban. India can also be part of the development in Afghanistan. So this is what it has been suggested. So by participating in Shanghai Cooperation Organization, so India can actually engage with Afghanistan diplomatically and leverage multiple platforms to counter Pakistan and China's influence. So remember, as I have already told you, that Pakistan and China's presence in Afghanistan is not in the best interest of India. So it is very important that India needs to protect its interests. So therefore, India could engage more proactively with Taliban or with Afghanistan through regional groupings like Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And India can also collaborate with other like-minded countries like USA and Russia and even Central Asian republics. So those countries have good relations with India firstly, and secondly, these countries also have stakes in Afghanistan, and because of this particular reason, so it will provide India the much needed leverage to engage with the Taliban regime and also continue its efforts to build soft power, to build goodwill in Afghanistan, right? So that could prevent Afghanistan from becoming a breeding ground for terrorism, right? So it is very important that this Taliban regime should not shelter the terrorist organizations, because that could threaten the entire regional security. So India, along with these like-minded countries, could ensure that Taliban would not house or provide safe harbors to these terrorist organizations. For example, India is part of the Financial Action Task Force, and in fact Financial Action Task Force acts against terror financing. It also acts against black money or money laundering at the international level, right? So it also has two lists. One is blacklist and the other is grey list. So if countries are not implementing measures to combat money laundering, terror financing, black money, so then those countries would be placed under the sanctions as per the blacklist or as per the FATF blacklist or grey list, right? So therefore, such participation would ensure that India would play an important part in preventing Taliban regime harboring these terrorist organizations that could act against India in future. And apart from that, the people-to-people relations, the cultural ties and educational support between India and Afghanistan is a very important element or a very important component of the bilateral relations between these two countries. So therefore, India should continue to provide more and more opportunities for the people of Afghanistan to ensure that this goodwill is further carried on, further maintained, and in fact there is a need to further enhance people-to-people ties as well, particularly providing visas to Afghan students, Afghan Afghan patients who are coming to India for medical treatment and even for multiple reasons. So all those things have to be areas where India could work on to further strengthen its relations. So but India should stick to its policy of a peaceful resolution of Afghan issue through Afghan led, Afghan owned and Afghan controlled peaceful process, right? So this is what is India's policy with respect to Afghanistan, and you could discuss all these, and this is how you could write multiple dimensions in this particular question, right? So next we move on to some important articles. First one is Prime Minister Narendra Modi to open Jed Morph Tunnel. So we'll understand what exactly is this Jed Morph Tunnel and where it is located and what is its importance or significance. We'll try to understand this, right? So the Jed Morph Tunnel is said to become the first major milestone effort to build a strategic corridor, and this Jed Morph Tunnel will be built between Kashmir and Ladakh, right? So this will be built between Kashmir and Ladakh, and this will be open throughout the year, with Prime Minister Narendra Modi is going to inaugurate this Jed Morph Tunnel. Now one thing that we need to understand here with respect to this Jed Morph Tunnel, so which is an all-weather tunnel which is going to be opened throughout the year. So sometimes this rugged terrain in the Jammu and Kashmir region, particularly Ladakh and Jammu and Kashmir region. So because of rugged terrain, generally what happened, it is sometimes difficult to have an all-weather connectivity to connect different places in the Jammu and Kashmir as well as the Ladakh Union Territory. So because in order to overcome this rugged territory and ensure all weather connectivity to different places in Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh, so the government has been building a series of tunnels. Now it is not just important for connectivity transportation, but it is also important for some military reasons as well, right? So it is very important that we need to quickly mobilize our security forces to these regions so that we would have a strategic advantage against our adversaries China and Pakistan. So this is another major reason. So we'll understand some important details with respect to this Jed Morph tunnel, right? So this is a 2-lane road tunnel, right? So this is a 2-lane road tunnel, and this tunnel is located between Gagangir and Sonmarg. Okay, so this is between Gagangir and Sonmarg on the Srinagar-Leh highway in Jammu and Kashmir, right? So it is between it is located on the Srinagar-Leh highway in Jammu and Kashmir, and this road tunnel is located between Gagangir and Sonmarg. And in fact the name J Morph, it actually refers to Jed-shaped road, right? So it actually means Jed-shaped road near the construction site, and because of that particular reason, so this tunnel is also known as Jed Morph Tunnel. And in fact, so the area where this tunnel is going to be built or it's going to be constructed sits at an altitude of about 8,500 kilometers. So the altitude is 8,500 feet, and in fact it is highly prone to the snow avalanches in some month during particularly some months a year. So this region is highly prone to snow avalanches, and because of these snow avalanches, landslides, very often it becomes very difficult to connect these two regions, Gagangir and Sonmarg, right? So it is very difficult to connect these 2 points in the Srinagar-Leh highway in Jammu and Kashmir. So however, this tunnel is going to overcome those difficulties when it comes to connecting these 2 regions. So thereby this tunnel will open all the year, throughout the year, and it is also an all-weather tunnel that has been built. And in fact this tunnel is designed for a flow of 1,000 vehicles an hour, right? So through this tunnel around 1,000 vehicles can pass in one single year at an approved maximum speed of 80 km per hour. And in fact there will be no toll collected throughout this tunnel. And apart from that, so this tunnel has the intelligent traffic management system. It has intelligent traffic management system, and this is a very important part of traffic management in the tunnel. And in fact, so this traffic management system has been installed in Jed Morph Tunnel, right? So it has been involved in, so installed in Jedmore tunnel. So that will make it easier to control the traffic. Along with this traffic will be facilitated through the dedicated escape tunnels as well. So apart from this, if something goes wrong with this tunnel, so a dedicated escape tunnels are also built along this tunnel. So therefore it is being installed with the intelligent traffic management system. And apart from that, as we have already discussed, that this is an all-weather tunnel, as this tunnel provides all-weather access to Sonmarg region, and the tunnel is vital for ensuring year-round connectivity to Ladakh. Now you could see here, right, this is Sonmarg, right? So this is Sonmarg and this is Kangan region. Now earlier the road is like passes through this way, but this is where the tunnel has been built, right? So this is where the tunnel has been built, and because of this tunnel has been built, so it will become an all-weather road, because earlier this region has been facing a lot of problems because of snow avalanche, and snow avalanche has made this region not accessible throughout the year. But when this tunnel is being built, so this road will be accessible throughout the year as well, right? And in fact, this is very important. This tunnel is very important, particularly for the movement of military personnel to the border areas. So along with the 14.15 kilometer Jojila tunnel, right? So you could see this is the Jojila pass, right? And this is the Jojila tunnel that has been built, right? This is the Jojila pass and this is the Jojila tunnel. So along with 14.15 kilometer Jojila tunnel to its east, it aims to enhance the Indian military's capabilities in the Kashmir region, Indian military's capabilities in the Kashmir and Ladakh region, along with line of control as well as the line of actual control as well, right? So this is where these tunnels are being built. So you could see here, right? So I hope you have understood about Jedmore tunnel in Jammu and Kashmir. So next is, Pravasi Bharatiya Divas has been celebrated on January 9, and in fact some dignitaries who have made exceptional contribution to strengthening India's soft power, goodwill, India's relations with other countries are being honored in this Pravas Bharatiya Divas, right? So it is important for us to understand what exactly is Pravas Bharatiya Divas. So why Pravas Bharatiya Divas is being celebrated? So it is important for us to understand all those details. So let's try to understand the Pravas Bharatiya Divas. In fact, Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurated this 18th Pravas Bharatiya Divas, right? So he inaugurated the 18th Pravas Bharatiya Divas convention, and this is a very important event. It is an important event because this event is celebrated once in 2 years, right? So it is celebrated in once in 2 years and honored the contributions of the Indian diaspora to their homeland. Whoever settled in other countries, whoever working in other countries, whatever contributions that they have made to further strengthening India's relations with those other countries or India's soft power in those respective countries, so they will be honored during the Pravas Bharatiya Divas, and it will be celebrated once in 2 years on January 19, right? So this year's theme of Pravas Bharatiya Divas was diaspora contributions to a Vikasit Bharat, right? So diaspora's contributions to a Vikasit Bharat. So we all knew that we have the goal of becoming a Vikasit Bharat or the developed country by the year 2047. So how diaspora will contribute to India, making it a developed nation by the year 2047. So we'll try to understand some details with respect to Pravas Bharatiya Divas. So as I have already told you that this Pravas Bharatiya Divas is celebrated once in 2 years on January 9 to strengthen the engagement of Indian community which is living in overseas, with the Indian government and reconnect them with their respective roots. Imagine that some of your family member is working in some other country, and if they have made some exceptional contribution to strengthen India's relations with that respective country, or he or the community which is living there has made exceptional contribution to substantially improve India's soft power, India's goodwill in those respective countries. So it is very important, right? So it is very important to recognize, to identify that particular contribution of diaspora community, because so it would motivate them, right? So it would motivate them that they have done something for their ancestral land, and that's how you provide them an opportunity to connect with their roots. And in fact, why January 9 is being celebrated as a Pravasi Bharatiya Divas, so this aspect should also be understood. And so why January 9 is being celebrated as a Pravas Bharati Divas? It is because on this particular day in 1950, Mahatma Gandhi returned to India from South Africa. So in order to recognize his return from South Africa and then later participation in the Indian national movement, the Pravas Bharati Divas would be celebrated on January 9th once in a 2 years. And in fact, so from 2003 onwards, this Pravas Bharati Divas is celebrated every year, right? So from 2003 onwards, Pravas Bharati Divas is celebrated every 2 years. But in 2015, some changes have been made. From 2015, Pravas Bharati Divas would be celebrated only once in a 2 years, but not every year, right? So that aspect also you should understand. So as I have already told you, that it marks the contribution of Indians who are living abroad in the development of the land of their ancestors, right? So through this Pravas Bharatiya Divas, so an award is also being provided. So in fact, during the convention, Pravas Bharatiya Samman Award is being conferred on the selected overseas Indians. There are some Indians or organizations, entities which are based out of those respective countries, so which have substantially strengthened India's image, India's relations with those respective countries, and they also played a very important part in further enhancing, further strengthening India's soft power, goodwill in those respective countries. Those organizations, entities, non-resident Indians, and even the overseas citizens of India or persons of Indian origin will be recognized through the Pravasi Bharatiya Samman Award, right? So apart from that, this Pravas Bharatiya Samman Award is conferred by the President of India, right? So President of India confers this award to the entities, organizations, individuals, NRIs, and overseas citizens of India. And in fact, so there were existing NRIs, right? So people who live outside India, they are being called as they are being categorized into three different categories. One is NRIs, and second is overseas citizens of India, third is persons of Indian origin. So it is important for us to understand the distinction between three different groups, right? So NRIs are those people who are citizens of India, right? They are citizens of India, but they are working in some other country, right? So after the work is being completed, they come back to India, so they are known as non-resident Indians. And secondly, the overseas citizens of India. So overseas citizens of India are not citizens of India, they are citizens of other country, the citizens of another country in which they are living, but their parents or their relatives are traced back to India. They are known as overseas citizens of India. So in fact, overseas citizens of India is being defined under the Citizenship Act of 1955. And apart from that, the persons of Indian origin. So in fact, Center has discontinued this persons of Indian origin, and in fact it is being merged with the overseas citizens of India. So we'll try to understand that aspect as well. So as I have already explained, that NRIs are the Indian citizens who are residing in the foreign countries, and overseas citizens of India are foreign nationals. They are not Indian nationals, they're foreign nationals, they have foreign citizenship, but they are being registered as overseas citizens of India under Section 7 of the Citizens Citizens of India Act 1955, right? So the eligibility criteria to become an overseas citizen of India become like this. So they should be, their parents, their relatives should be eligible to be citizens on January 26, 1950, were Indian citizens after this date, and they belong to territories that become part of India after August 15, 1947, and minor children of eligible individuals, except those from Pakistan and Bangladesh, are the overseas citizens of India. So in fact, the persons of Indian origin is being abolished in the year 2015. So there was no persons of Indian origin now, and it is being merged with the overseas citizens of India category. In fact, according to the Ministry of External Affairs, around 3.5 crore overseas Indians, including NRIs and persons of Indian origin and overseas citizens of India. So around 3.5 crore Indians are living in other countries or based out in abroad. Now, what is the message at the 18th Pravas Bharatiya Divas convention? That is what we should understand here. So in fact, Prime Minister Narendra Modi called for global peace through a slogan called "From Yuddha to Buddha." Because India is known as land of Buddha, therefore Prime Minister Narendra Modi emphasized that future lies in peace, not war or not violence. So that is being symbolized by Buddha, and future lies not in war but in peace. And in fact, Prime Minister Narendra Modi also cited Ashoka's transformation at Dhauli in Odisha, particularly during the Kalinga War, and it is an inspiration for India's advocacy for the peace. And apart from that, Prime Minister Narendra Modi also talked about India's role in the international arena, particularly India's leadership position in the global south, because India has been taking several initiatives to to further strengthen its relations or further improve the living standards, development of countries in the global south, right? So therefore, one example is during the G20 meeting that was held in India 2023. African Union became part of the G20 summit at the initiative of India, right? So that stresses India's leadership role in the global south. And in fact, Prime Minister Narendra Modi also stressed on the principle of humanity first in the international engagements of India, right? So we keep humanity at first instead of our national interest. So this is what Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been stressing us, and this could be interpreted from one example that during COVID-19 pandemic, we have provided vaccines to several countries in the global south, right? So we have provided vaccines to number of countries, medicines to number of countries, and for that matter, for Africa, we even sent the medical professionals as well, along with vaccines, medical equipment, medicines, and even the medical professionals as well. So that reiterates India's strong commitment of keeping humanity at first instead of its national interests, because at that point of time, remember, India was also facing the worst impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we have the goal of becoming a developed country by the year 2047. So we wanted to become a developed country that is also known as a Vikasit Bharat. Now it is very important that we need to identify or understand the contribution of NRIs, overseas citizens of India, persons of Indian origin, their contribution in making India a Vikasit Bharat by 2047. Remember, because Indian diaspora who are living abroad, they are sending more than $100 billion, back to India, right? So therefore remittances back to India. So therefore it is very important that we need to identify the contribution, right? So acknowledged Indian diaspora contribution towards India, a developed nation, by the 100th year of its independence by the year 2047, and encouraged the collaborative efforts to celebrate and also protect the diaspora's role in India's overall progress. So the next topic is decoding India's genetic blueprint. So this is with respect to Genome India project. So in Genome India project, so genome sequences is being identified. So unique genome of every individual is like almost identified, and that will have important implications for drug designing, drug manufacturing, vaccine manufacturing, and even so that could also help us understand new genetic diseases. So therefore it could potentially revolutionize the healthcare. So if we have such a decoded genome blueprint, so we'll try to understand this as well, because recently the Indian Genomics Data Conclave has been hosted, right? Genomics Data Conclave that has been hosted by the Department of Biotechnology, and in this Genomics Data Conclave that has been hosted by Department of Biotechnology, Prime Minister Narendra Modi unveiled a sequencing database of 10,000 Indians. So this actually consisting of a genetic sequence of around 10,000 Indians, and it is being released by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, right? So Genome India project, so that was held as part of the Genome India project. So 10,000 Indians genome data has been compiled to, because as I have already told you, it is having huge implications for human healthcare. So because of that reason, 10,000 individuals genome database has been compiled. So the sequencing data will now be accessible to researchers through Indian biological data centers, whoever conducting research on these aspects. So this 10,000 individuals database will be available through Indian Biological Data Center. So we'll understand what exactly is this genome sequencing, and we'll also understand Genome India project as well. Now in fact, so genome sequencing essentially means that, while we have DNA in our body, right? So while a sequence or an order of base pairs is identical among all human beings, right? So this is how DNA usually look like. And in fact, the sequence or order of base pairs, so these are known as the base pairs, okay? So the order of base pairs or genome is almost identical among all humans, but there are differences in terms of genome. So human genome is different for every human being, and because of that different genome which is existing in different human beings, each human being would be unique. Okay, so each human being is unique because of genome that they possess. So each human being have a different genome. And this process of deciphering the genome or genome order or the base pairs, so we need to decipher the base pairs to decode this genome or genetic information or genetic fingerprint is known as the genome sequencing. So it is being called as the genome sequencing, the process of deciphering the order of the base pairs. So how is the order of the base pairs? So when we understand the order of the base pairs, we could also decode the genetic fingerprint of a human, and that is what is known as genome sequencing. And in fact, so genome sequencing is actually a process of determining the complete DNA sequence of a organism's genome. For example, there's a person A, and genome sequencing would involve the process of determining complete DNA sequence of this particular individual A is known as genome sequencing. And in fact, there are several methods to understand genome sequencing or to do the genome sequencing, but the most common is called as next generation sequencing. So next generation sequencing is the most common method of genome sequencing, and next generation sequencing allows for rapid and more accurate and even cost effective sequencing of large amount of DNA. Okay, so it is most effective most viable method of DNA sequencing. And apart from that, we need to understand this Genome India project as well. So this Genome India project was approved by the government in the year 2020, and the Genome India project aims to create a comprehensive catalog of genetic variations, right? So within the Indian population, certain communities are being identified, and within those communities, the the genetic information such as the comprehensive catalog of genetic variation is being framed or being identified as part of the Genome India project. And in fact, it has been sanctioned by the Department of Biotechnology, and this project aims to sequence the genomes of around 10,000 individuals. So 10,000 individuals genomes are being sequenced as part of the Genome India project from different regions across the country to establish a reference genome for the Indian population. So this is going to be a reference genome for the Indian population. What is the significance of this Genome India project? So as I have already mentioned, the significance of Genome India project, because it will help us understand the genetic variations which are being unique to India's population. And this project will also allow researchers to learn about the genetic variations which are unique to India's population groups, and use that to customize drugs, therapies, vaccines, and understand the genetic diseases among human beings. So all these things can be effectively done if we have that sequenced genome data. And human genome project, so this is a project at the global scale, at the international scale, and the human genome project was began in the year 1990. So this was to determine the whole sequence of human genome under the Human Genome Project. And in fact, this project released the latest version of the complete human genome in the year 2023 with just 0.3% of error margin. And in fact, the process of whole genome processing or whole genome sequencing of human beings made possible by the Human Genome Project. So after this Human Genome Project, India in fact started that particular project. Okay, so now it has facilitates reading of a person's individual genome to identify the differences from average human genome. So what are the differences between one human's genome from other human's genome? All these things can be effectively understood. Okay, so these differences from one human being to another human being, or one particular individual's genome to the average genome of a group of individuals, will help us understand the differences, will also help us understand mutations, and they can tell us about each human susceptibility to future vulnerability to various diseases, and their reaction and sensitivity to a particular stimulus, and so on. Particularly, there are a lot of genetic diseases, the cancers, diabetes, and different genetic diseases, and it is very important for us to understand the reasons for those genetic diseases so that there would be a potential cure for those diseases. And in fact, genetic diseases are chronic diseases. It is very difficult to get the treatment for those diseases. So in order to get a proper treatment at an affordable prices, so there is a need for such a research has to be done. In fact, the applications of this Human Genome Project or India Genome Project is to enhance drug efficacy and safety, because the genetic studies, understanding the genetics or the genetic makeup or genome sequencing, can identify resistance indicating variants, so thereby ensuring safer and more effective treatments for those genetic diseases. And it would also result in advancing targeted treatments as well, because an Indian genome database can aid in the development of targeted therapies, particularly for rare genetic diseases. So these are some advantages or benefits of this Human Genome Project, right? So I hope you have understood this, and thank you so much. If you like our work, so please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.